Spanish Eagles then, here in Eagles of the Empire. It's the 11 AM turn. Saul rolled a single activation and has kicked us off here at 11 AM by moving Bronze Cavalry forward from here into this area here to stop this attack from Lumley's cavalry down into the flanks of Gerard's infantry. So Bronze now protecting the flanks there. You have to be 2 areas away to do a cavalry charge, so that isn't possible. And so now the Allies are looking at this position here and wondering whether there's any way to exploit Bronze cavalry, or to at least maybe force him to leave and then open up this attack again. The trouble is, things that they move in here that might threaten Bronn might be walking onto this French artillery, but it looks like the French artillery's not, it's just going to grind forward. It's difficult to know what to do about all this artillery or how to counter it, because the Allies I think the way to counter it for the Allies may be to at least get some more artillery on the board, and they've got 4 bits of artillery, 4 artillery units here, 4 strength points of artillery sat off map at the moment, because Stuart's currently hidden. So the Allies have been thinking about what to do and are going to try and roll an activation for Beresford. I think he's got a 3 initiative, whereas Blake's got a 4. But if Blake activates, they've got nothing really to do with him. He wants to stay out of range for sure. So they're going to have a roll for Beresford, and I'll roll a red dice for him, and he gets a 5 and fails to activate, and we're back over onto the French. Saul has got a 5 as well, so he's got 1 more activation, and let's see what he wants to do, and I'll let the cat out to stop it prying at me. So Saul activated these 2 infantry divisions under Girard, and they hadn't quite realised how difficult it would be to move artillery through this terrain, because from, say, here, for example, to get artillery into here is impossible, because there's a slope against you and an elevation change and a movement point to get in the zone. So 1 for the zone, 1 for the +1 elevation, 1 for the slope, 3 movement points. They only get 2. Not possible. Same with infantry, actually. Not even the infantry can get up here, because they only get 2 as well. So Girard's infantry pulled in here. The artillery, some of his artillery swung out to cover his flank to threaten this cavalry over here with some artillery, and Verla pushed his artillery into this zone here as the only way of getting it somewhere where it might be manoeuvrable, and swung his infantry to try and cover this flank as best he could. And now we're going to see if the Allies can get an activation, and again they're going to try with Beresford, I think, to see what he can do, and he's got a 1, so he's now got 2 activations. That's good news. So now we're going to fire Stuart up, I think. So the question is, have I put all his stuff in really stupid places where his artillery isn't going to be usable? And I think the answer's sort of yes and no. Okay, so let's activate Stuart. Let's put Beresford, Stuart, and so on the board. So Beresford and Stuart are in here. Stuart's big infantry division's in here. Doesn't matter about the facing for now. And he's got artillery 1 and 2 with him, so he's got a couple of points of artillery with him. And then his divisional light infantry and his artillery 3 and 4 are over here. Okay, that's okay. And who else are we going to activate? We may as well activate Alton in this activation as well, so let's fire up Stuart and Alton. Alton's up here because we want to fire off Alton's artillery. So yeah, what do we do first? We do command determination. Well, we know they're both in command. So we do cavalry charges, assignment. Don't want to do any assignment, I don't think. So now we do a bombardment segment and then we do movement. Okay, let's have our 2 dice from the King's German Legion Artillery there into Gazan up over here, see if we can roll any 6s. So let's give that a go. Oh, we've got a 6. We've got a 6. That's a hit. Well done, Alton. Alton has therefore put some successful fire into this infantry here, and the first hit has to be on a long infantry unit, so they've taken some fire. Okay, and then we're doing movement. So moving from, there's no slope here, and this is what we'd planned, so we can move although Gerard's infantry looking very scary there, 5 strength and some artillery with him, but okay, whatever. We've got to try and oppose them somehow. So what we'll do is we'll push the divisional lights up here for 2 movement points and his artillery up here for 2 movement points, and that's got the hexagon, so it's got all round defence anyway, so that looks fine, at least a defensive position. And Stuart's this is not has not got the hexagon in it, but still we can stick Stuart back there and some artillery in front of him. Like that. Not quite sure. I'm really not sure about how the extent to which I know long infantry can't bust out over the areas, but I'm not sure the extent to which other units are allowed to. Because I don't know if you're allowed to just do this and just stack the artillery like that. I assume you are, because you're allowed to stack units. Anyway, Stuart's going in there. Beresford will stay back where he was. And that's their movement done. And then they get to do any assaults that they want to do. And I don't think they want to do any assaulting. So that looks like a really, really bad plan. So that looks like that activation done. And we're now going to go back to Saul and see what he wants to do. And he's going to get 1 activation again. He's got the Tormobergen breach down over there to do something with, or he could activate one of these lot, I suppose. What might be interesting is pushing Gazan forward. To put some more pressure on here, threatening to maybe cross the bridge at some point. Or they can just stay more passive and fire, and I think, yeah, let's just see if we can't. Let's just activate Gazan and get him to return fire. With 4 dice, except only 1 dice in here because of the town, but still 1 dice. They've got a hit, and that is going to shred the King's German Legion a little bit more. And unfortunately, Alton is now down to his last step and no longer a long unit. They've been shredded by the by the cannon fire, and now we have to go for an activation by who do we want to activate? That's a good question. Let's see if Beresford can get another activation. No, he can't. We're back on Saul, and he's got one more activation to do. So he's going to fire up Godino here. 4 dice. He's going to have 1 dice down here, but he's not going to hit anything. The British are going to try and fire up Beresford again and get 2 activations with Beresford. Let's see what they want to do, because they've got cavalry, they've got Lumley who could activate, and they've got Otway up here who could do something as well. And have a look at their options. Well, with his 2 activations, Beresford decided to move his cavalry. Lumley was feeling very exposed out here, now suddenly facing off against some very potent French cavalry backed up with artillery. This whole charging flank business didn't look on. He didn't want to pull up into these hills because he'd be stuck out in no man's land in front of his own infantry and artillery, so he pulled back here into Albuera, which isn't the greatest spot for him, but it's more active and useful than where he'd ended up. And up here, the other cavalry leader, Otway, the Portuguese cavalry, split up between, so it left some in here with the King's German Legion artillery, but split up some other cavalry amongst Stuart's division to give that some cavalry support. So they've now got combined arms bonuses in any assault combat. Who have we got left on the French side to activate? We've got Bouvier and the cavalry over here, Briche and La Tour-Maubourg. So let's see what Saul gets as an activation. He's got 1 activation. I think he's just going to pass with Bouvier. Bouvier's just going to activate because his cavalry is split amongst his infantry defending it. And we're back over here. Beresford has got Cole to activate, but Cole's in a bit of a standoff just in the woods for protection. Doesn't want to expose himself to artillery fire and keeping an eye on that ford. So he's kind of locked down. So it might make sense to activate Blake. But on the other hand, Blake is wanting to play a waiting game to see what the French cavalry do. So we'd like to activate with Beresford and see if Cole can get an activation. Let's try that then. And he gets 1 activation. And so what we're going to do is just activate Cole, and he's going to stay put. And throw it back over to the French. And so now Saul has got 3 activations. He's got 2 units left to activate, which is La Tour-Maubourg and Briche. So he can either activate them and pass with them, or activate with them and do something with them. So I think doing something is probably better. Now they don't want to charge this. They do want to take the high ground so that they're not having to come up this sloped line up here, which is really, really gnarly. I hadn't quite realised quite how gnarly it was. I mean, there's gully here, and then there's open ground over here. So with 3 movement points, La Tour-Maubourg can come 1, 2, 3 right down into this corner, and Briche can come 1, 2, 3, and slowly work their way around onto the well, this can't be flanked, but slowly work their way around to a situation where they're not charging uphill, up slopes into infantry and cavalry combined. So let's see what Blake wants to do. He's going to pick up one activation, and let's have a think about what his troops want to do. So a bit of trouble here for the Allies. Positional trouble, not combat trouble, but with all the French activated, the Spaniards thought they were going to get activations to play with, and so they pushed Espana with his small infantry brigade and a bit of rare Spanish artillery onto these hills here, because they didn't want this position being flanked by the French moving in round here. Blake was planning to bolster that by then ordering Ballastros forward with maybe some more artillery, with the flank covered by Castaños's cavalry over here. Unfortunately, he's just failed 2 successive activation rolls on 4s. He's just rolled 2 5s and the turn's over. So they're now left kind of hanging with a very weak force here and some quite strong French in front of them. Girard might fancy having a go at this lot and just charging it or assaulting it straight off the bat, trying to shove it out of the way and then get tucked into the flank of the Allies up here, and this all could get very, very unpleasant quite quickly. So yeah, that's how the 11 AM turn ended. As we move into midday, so it's the 12 o'clock turn, and the French are trying to find the right position for an attack here. They were stuck behind this slope with their artillery and their infantry down here, having crossed the stream, and they needed to try and get more of their infantry and artillery closer to the enemy to prepare it for an attack. Their cavalry was being wasted outright over here. They'd looked at this situation and decided that that alone La Tour Maubourg and Briche weren't going to make enough of an impact and just weren't dangerous. There was no chance of flanking these because they were on these fortified hilltop positions, and they needed their cavalry to cover the flanks of this infantry, which is trying to manoeuvre into a position where it can actually get to grips with the Spanish. So they've now got this position here with Girard and Verla in here, some artillery there, some artillery covering the flank, some cavalry on either side on the flanks of their infantry divisions, and La Tour Maubourg stationed out here, hoping to get an opportunity to do something if the Spanish readjust. So that's taken up. That was Soult, who rolled a 1 on his initiative and therefore had four activations. So that was this entire wing that he's just reorganised to try and prepare an attack for 1 PM. And we're now rolling to see if the Spaniards get to do anything. They're going to roll a 3, so they're going to get 1 activation. I think Blake's probably going to activate himself. Yeah, Blake's going to activate himself. Because that will allow him to move all his stuff and Desaius and Van Larzabel out here. So let's see what he can do. So coming into the 1 PM turn in the afternoon here at Albuera in the Eagles of the Empire, Spanish Eagles, Soult was hoping for a nice low initiative number so that he could activate lots of units at once and kick this lot into gear to start an assault on this Spanish Anglo-Portuguese combined position up here with his 2 infantry divisions. Instead he rolled a 1 and didn't want that because he wants to try and get a combined arms thing going with some of this cavalry and attaching the artillery to the infantry and blah blah blah. So with that 1 command he just decided to fire Order Gazan's artillery to keep bombarding Albuera, which they did, hit Albuera, caught the dragoons and killed Alton, who is now deceased. And so that was very successful for them. The King's German Legion in here were suddenly leaderless, and they've taken some casualties, 2 on the infantry. The cavalry that Lumley had dropped in there got hit straight away. Leader killed, not looking great. The British tried to respond by getting Beresford to to activate, hoping that they could fire off some artillery of their own down into the French, down here massing at the foot of the hills. Failed to activate. Soule then fails to activate by rolling a 6. Back-to-back failures to activate is the end of the turn. And so we now move into the 2 p.m. turn with the position much as we were, waiting for the French to launch this attack. I wish I had some more French down here. I wish I had either another infantry division. It feels like we're just bottled up here on this hill with only this bridge to get across, and you can only cross it in road movement because of the way the movement point works. So that's a real bottleneck, and being stuck up here, it's not really a ridge, but being stuck up here looking at Albuera isn't doing us any good, and I think I'm going to try and bump Godino forward into these woods and see if we can't get some pressure in here, maybe. That was another plan that the French had anyway, was to push Godino forward. The artillery can't make it down this embankment, so they're going to carry on bombarding, but the infantry might have to get pushed forward into these woods and see if we can't get some threat in here to expand our options. But anyway, yeah, the 1 p.m. turn passed with a lot of confusion. The death of a British officer and some cavalry, but very quiet as everyone braces themselves for the attack. So at 2 o'clock, Soule launched his attack over here on the French left. You can see Girard has forced this guy here, Ballastos, I think he's called, Ballastros, the España back there with some casualties, and there was another small Spanish brigade that got wiped out in that attack, and the rest got forced back off this hill, which Girard has taken with some casualties. And it's one of these all-round spots, so he can defend that hill now from all comers, although he's got Bron preventing them from being sort of surrounded. The Spanish have now, Blake has got a good roll and has got 3 activations, so he can activate this whole area. His main problem is that this guy here, Ballastros, is actually out of command. It looks like he should be in command, but because de España is a subordinate of Castanos and is out of Castanos' range of 1, and because they're not flexible in their command structures, so this division here has to be either commanded by de España, who's out of command, so can't do that, or by Castanos, who's out of range, so can't do that. So this guy is actually out of command, and de España is going to have to roll to try and be in command. But anyway, Blake is going to activate himself, and that will also activate Zayas, who is a force commander under him, and he will activate his 2 cavalry commanders, Castanos, who's at range 1 and so is in command, and Loy over here, who's range 2 and so is in command. And then we'll try for a miracle, or at least a 1 in 6 chance, not quite as dramatic as a miracle, but he'll have the 1 in 6 go. De España will have a go and see if he can act under his own initiative. Let's see what happens to him. And he gets a 2, close but not good enough. So these guys are out of command and won't be able to take any action. So Blake now has to work out what his response is with the rest of these. But I think we're going to see Van Ladazabal. I don't know. That's short for something, and it's like Ladazabal or something. He'll come back round this way, and the cavalry will work out what it's got to do. So, Eagles of the Empire here at Albuera at the end of the 2 p.m. turn in Spanish Eagles. And I think one of the things that I'm noticing about this game is that this still looks very much like a Napoleonic battlefield. It doesn't just look like some random scrum. There are sort of lines and attacks and manoeuvres being made. Maybe you could argue that's because I've been quite cautious, or maybe I haven't. I don't know, but something is happening here which is keeping this looking quite like Napoleonic armies trying to get to grips with each other. The French attacked in here, out on the Spanish right, pushed forward, and the Blake mustered a lot of force here to counterattack. He was in here and counterattack in here, counterattacked into Girard here. I think it was pretty much even in terms of casualties. Now you can withdraw, you can retreat as the attacker or the defender to reduce your casualties, and so Blake did that. I think he took one casualty, or would have taken one casualty on Desaius, but because he withdrew, he didn't have to take it. That reduced the number of casualties on Girard, but no, Blake did one more. He did two hits to Girard and took one himself, and Girard had to take that because, as far as I can tell, his alternative was to be destroyed for failure to withdraw, because he hasn't got anywhere to go. Everything. This was. I'm assuming you can't withdraw into a hex that your enemy attacked out of. That would be a bit silly, and he can't fit in here due to stacking limitations. So he took the hit because he couldn't withdraw to reduce it further. So voila. One thing to mention is that while this game comes with version 3 of the rules, and they're okay, there is online a version 3.1, and this does make some further clarifications, or we could call them changes, or we could call them updates, to very, to well-used bits of the game, like the assaults. This describes in quite a lot more detail how you get to, how you get or have to assign hits to units, and how those are reduced via retreats, and who has to retreat and who doesn't have to. If the attacker retreats, then the defender doesn't, or withdraws, then the defender doesn't have to withdraw in order to prevent a hit. All that kind of stuff. It's not really very well explained in here. You're kind of guessing your way through it. In this one, it's better explained. But working with two rule sets simultaneously isn't kind of ideal. You end up sort of betwixt and between. It's a bit confusing. Anyway, the Blake's force here, interesting. There's some sophistication in this system in that, he's attacking. Blake was attacking with Desaius, who's got a morale of 5. That number over here. But most of his force was this 1-2 cavalry of Castaños, and the morale of your group is based on the most common morale amongst all your troops, so he's got 4 strength points at morale 5, but he had 7 strength points at morale 2, and a bit of artillery, which was morale 3. But the most common, I think in maths, the mean median mode, no, maybe even the mode, the most commonly occurring is your overall morale. So his was 2, and even as the attacker, you have to be able to make a morale roll to advance after combat, or to stay, not to have to withdraw. So although the cavalry made the attack far more potent in terms of strength, it also meant that the Spanish couldn't really hope to hold the position that they were attacking. It's quite... There's things in this game that are really quite interesting in that respect. Whereas Girard over here, his troops with this... No, they weren't, because this is the C side. So his troops were on the B side, which would be over here. So he had 4 troops at a morale of 4. So he had a pretty good morale, a pretty good chance of sticking around. And it's just as well they did, because as I say, they had nowhere to withdraw to, and if they'd been forced to withdraw by a failed morale roll, they would have been destroyed. So they're in quite a precarious position here. And that's where we are as we go into the 3 p.m. turn. Let's just make a quick roll for some weather. So I'll grab the dice down, a couple of dice. Let's do that. That's not going to be any bad weather. So still no rain, and we're carrying on into 3 p.m.